Oh, adding a spoiler alert before all this because I realized I need to. 3:22 a.m. At the time that I'm writing this, it's June 21st, 2019 at 3:18 a.m. I'm currently starting the third season of Sherlock Holmes after finishing up the second season while finalizing my last video script. You won't know what video that is. Now, I originally just wanted to jump straight into this episode because I think that this show's phenomenal portrayal of Sherlock Holmes in the New Age is amazing. And I've been a huge fan of Sherlock Holmes ever since like 7th grade, but I've never made the connection until now. Now, for those that had read the Sherlock Holmes novels, watched the movie with Robert Downey Jr., or had seen the series as I am right now, you know about the whole Moriarty versus Sherlock Holmes final battle. That's specifically referring to the final problem and then the return of Sherlock Holmes, which were created by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle after trying to kill his character. Emphasis on trying because that means that Sherlock Holmes didn't die. Sherlock Holmes didn't die after plunging to his death like all of his friends had thought. And not only that, he had shown up to his own funeral. And that's when it hit me. You know who else had done that? Joseph Joestar. Now, here's a problem. The version of Sherlock Holmes that shows up to his own funeral was the one in the show, and that episode came out in 2012. When Joseph had shown up to his own funeral, it was 1989. Now, while it seems like it would be a thing that Sherlock Holmes would do anyways, Araki was the first one to do that here. Not the first one to do the trope, but the first to do it out of him and the many writers of Sherlock Holmes adaptations. Because when Sherlock Holmes did come back from the dead, originally, he had traveled the world before coming home, and that was in The Adventure of the Empty House, the first novel after The Final Problem. Now, while there's more to connect the Battle Tendency and Sherlock Holmes together later on in this video, I think that it's extremely interesting that Araki had done something that was so Sherlock Holmes, it ended up actually becoming a thing in a later adaptation. Either that or the writers of the Sherlock series enjoy JoJo, which wouldn't be that crazy. I mean, it is a huge franchise. You know who else had extremely well observation skills that let him take apart every enemy he's ever come across? Joseph Joestar. And I was like, whoa, rewind. That can't be true. Unless, the Sherlock Holmes novels were a huge influence on almost all of Araki's works, or at least his early ones. Well, I did what any sensible human would do and took that information to Google. Googling Sherlock Holmes and Joseph Joestar. Lo and behold, by the greatness that is fate itself, I had found a comic book article going about Hirohiko Araki's interview with Kotoba. And guess what? According to the artist, Araki, I'm reading off of the article directly now, Sherlock Holmes taught Araki how to craft a very compelling story with narrative structure and charismatic leads. Doyle's series also showed Araki that heroes can be enjoyable, even if they are sometimes bad people, because it's completely true that Sherlock Holmes is a jerk. That's even going off of what Araki had said. And with that knowledge, we make the final connection on who is also an observant jerk that gets around doing what he wants at any given time. Joseph Joestar. But that gets me onto something. If Joseph Joestar is supposed to be Sherlock Holmes, then what does that say about everyone else in Battle Tendency? Well, Caesar specifically is still Caesar, meaning he's that Dio and Zeppeli fusion that Araki had wanted. I'm not stating that as clearly as I would want to. You can just refer to Medi's video on Caesar altogether. Is Lisa supposed to be Irene Adler? I mean, well, first of all, that'd be fucking weird because it's his mom, obviously, but Joseph did have a strong interest in her because of her skill, tact, and other reasons I shouldn't get into because I'm pretty sure he didn't feel the same way about those specific reasons after he found out that she was his mom. She was also the only woman to beat Sherlock, Irene Adler, and Lisa was the only woman to put Joseph into his place if we're talking about Battle Tendency. Irene Adler also had a career in opera, and golly gosh darn, what's the mask that we had first seen Lisa with? A mask with tears on one side and none on the other. Most likely a little reference to the opera, potentially, because the whole tragedy comedy thing I have going, maybe. Irene Adler was also one to disguise herself as a man at times to take advantage of the freedom which it gives. Purely a quote on that. I feel that There's also the whole political stuff behind and Irene Adler stuff where she got involved with the government and all that. And that's the same thing that happened with Lisa Lisa. And also, going back to the whole disguising herself as a man thing, Lisa Lisa's introduction also featured her disguising herself as a man, or at least that's what she looks like if we're going off of how Caesar and Joseph thought she was. But with all that going into that, and Lisa Lisa being Irene Adler, what does that say about the Pillarmen? Who are they supposed to be? Well, I'm not exactly sure on WAMU and AC/DC, but what I am sure is that Kars is Professor Moriarty. Holmes refers to Moriarty as a man of good birth and excellent education, endowed by nature with a phenomenal mathematical faculty. And we all know how Kars was an ultimate prodigy from the day that he was born. He was just this extreme genius among his people. Moriarty was also one to be behind the curtains, orchestrating all of his events. Makes sense, especially since Kars was the one leading AC/DC and WAMU to do what they did, except when it came to their own stuff, but all that truly mattered was pushing Kars' goal. Adding on to the Kars and Moriarty stuff, a vow from him to Sherlock was, "If you are clever enough to bring destruction upon me, rest assured I shall do as much to you." That also makes sense. You kill his AC/DC, WAMU kills your Caesar. You kill his WAMU, he'll go for your mom. While obviously Kars came out in the negative and didn't get even with Joseph, you know what I'm getting at. Also, in Sherlock Holmes, Moriarty had commissioned a gun from a blind German mechanic named von Herder. While the relationship is obviously not the same, a potential Stroheim connection? I mean, like, he did lose an eye, but I don't know. There's just von Stroheim, von Herder, German mechanic is I just don't know what to tell you. Now, while I am so happy to be getting these references now because I do believe that JoJo is this enormous universe that is still being explored on the surface and there's probably a lot more stuff that we aren't getting, do I believe that Joseph Joestar is Sherlock Holmes, like an execution? Well, no, not exactly. See, with Sherlock Holmes, you can understand as to how he's this observant. Instead of spending any time on information that won't be useful to him, he stockpiles his brain with everything else necessary. And there's a lot he really doesn't care about that's basic stuff to normal people, like knowing that our Earth orbits around the sun. That type of information is genuinely useless to him, and there's a lot of that information that he does not have in his head. He sacrifices social skills and basic information for anything that benefits his observation ability and the stuff that he can do with it. He also developed this type of stuff over time, having time in university and all of that. Joseph uses street smarts for about everything, and I'm not gonna lie to you, the streets will not teach you all that Joseph does. A lot of the early stuff he does, yeah, sure, and how he had basically made WAMU into a Molotov cocktail could also potentially point in that direction, but no, not everything Joseph does in execution. I'm personally fine with it, chalking it up to hormone that basically makes you smarter because of the whole Hermit Purple theory from way back, and it makes a lot of sense because of that monk way back then. He also had huge hormone and able to see into the future. It's not that crazy, people. Just get with the theory. I'm sure that Araki, if he was to be asked about it now, it would make a lot more sense to it, and he would just basically sum it up, and that'd basically be it. Joseph Joestar is supposed to be the anime street version of Sherlock Holmes. He's not exactly that to the T, but it's there. Plus, this is shonen. Not all shonen are going to be extremely stricken to the way that Sherlock Holmes is, and especially we have to be considering the time that Battle Tendency was in. It probably would just work all together there when it happened, but times now make it a huge different case. But yeah, thank you all for watching. I have not done a Battle Tendency video in about the longest amount of time, and it's honestly crazy because I do find stuff like this. It's just that in terms of getting on it, it's different. Like, I was able to write this script in a day, and that's not really a thing that I do. I usually spend a good amount of time on my stuff, but I'm just like, yo, man, this is something that I noticed it. I went sicko mode on the script, and I executed it. But yeah, definitely hoping to see more of this type of stuff in the future, because JoJo is filled to the brim with all types of references on other things that happen in life, and there's probably a lot of symbolism to a bunch of things in general. There's a bunch of musical connections too. and I hope, like, hopefully altogether I'll be able to get to it in the time that I want to. There's just so much to cover because I feel like I haven't scratched the surface on like a lot of shit, and there's a lot to be basically put out there. So definitely expect to see more part videos, especially with part 5 ending soon. Definitely have a lot of part 4 stuff that I never got to because part 5 came out pretty fast altogether. But I'm truly hoping that I will have the time to get to everything in the just right area that it needs to be on over, basically. So yeah, hopefully I'll see you all in the next one. Until then, peace out and Godspeed.